So yeah, as I said, I'm based in Delft, and where I came into this from was from an employee communications perspective. I came across to the Netherlands to work with a large energy organization, and I'd previously only worked with small teams. And I found that for somebody who has a responsibility to bring sense to what's going on in an organization in my role, I was completely overwhelmed with the ambiguity. Everybody's everywhere. You have no idea what projects are going on. And everybody else seems to be quite happy with that. When from the experience I had prior, you have to work quite hard in a small team just to create an awareness of what are we supposed to be doing here? Who are we? Why are we each doing these roles? What are we doing? How did that work out? And what should we do next? And after working in employee communications for 15 years, thinking that actually, maybe I needed to learn something because everybody else looked quite happy with everything, wandering around confidently with their, kind of going into meetings looking absolutely fine. I got together with an ex colleague who's an engineer to work on this approach that we talked about, that I'm about to introduce you to. We've been doing it now for 5.5 years. We've worked with teams all over the world. I wouldn't say that we're fully established, otherwise you would have heard about us already, but we are definitely getting there, and it's really exciting. So I'm glad to be able to share it with you today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a few slides and then have a bit of conversation about your reactions to that. So do store up your thoughts around how things are landing with you and what your own experiences are. And if I also have a demo that requires 5 people. So if nobody else joins live, then the 5 of us could complete that. So let's see how we go. Are there any questions before we begin about this? Okay, so it's going to be quite interactive, and I'm going to go quite fast because I know that you're experienced in coaching facilitation, which is an advantage, of course. So let me start by sharing my screen here with a bit of a definition and the scope, just to clarify kind of what we're doing here. So, a lot of people talk about alignment in different ways. It's a very difficult word. Some people talk about it being alignment of goals from the individual to the team, to the organization. And they've expanded that out in level 1 here, which is about alignment of the enterprise to the strategic intent. So it's about aligning the parts of the organization. We are not talking about that here. So aligning the parts of the organization, strategy, purpose, systems, capability, all of that kind of thing is crucial, of course, and the better that is, the better a starting point we've got. But we're talking about the next 2 levels. And that's about how people align to that core, let's say, enterprise or organization. And we're talking about how they align with each other. Now, you will know very clearly that dialogue is about the meaning that is shared between people. And it's really taking the philosophy that it's not about what individual people think and what individual preferences are, and even individual personalities. Alignment is about meaning that is shared between people, which can be cognitive or behavioral. So their understanding can be about what situation they're in or what they need to do next in order to achieve their shared goals, which is why we work on a team level, because they have shared goals. But alignment can also be about how they expect to collaborate to get that done, which is where the behaviors come in. And they're really, really powerful. So I'm going to go into a little bit about this people alignment piece. So if you think about the impacts of misalignment between people, the way that they can show up is that decisions and actions basically don't line up. They're not congruent. And the impact of decisions and actions not lining up are all of these things. I mean, it's colossal. And so it's a lens on these impacts and a lens on these problems and issues that are prevalent in organizations today that you can look at alignment being fundamental towards, because the way that people think and the way that people act in together determines everything that happens here. So productivity efforts that are having to be redone, reduced innovation, lost opportunities, unnecessary expenditure and increased turnover. All of these things you can say stem back to misalignment in one way or another. Just the way that people normally think about it in business is that it's a specific thing that caused them. You know, oh, it's employee engagement, or it's leadership, or it's our processes, or it's customer demand. But very often it's, if you look at the meta level, it's misalignment about all of those factors combined and how people are dealing with them that create some of these impacts. So I would say the challenge today is that collaboration and effective action, if you like, is not a case of just putting people together in the right team with the right knowledge and the right job descriptions. It's about how they integrate between them. So again, it's this between people, how they integrate their perspectives and collaborate. And you can say there's no perfect team. I mean, we call it the fog. I think they used to call it white noise. And there's no perfect team in terms of alignment. You know, everybody has, as you know, their biases, they make assumptions, they come to different interpretations about things. The more diverse the working world, and in fact, we'll get onto this from the research, the more hybrid or remote they're working, the more likely they are to come to different interpretations about things that simply need to be addressed proactively. So that's the work of the alignment coach. Let's take this as an example. I mean, this is kind of super obvious, and you're probably already getting this whole misalignment issue, but just to make it sort of super clear, you know, we're responsible to customer needs. What does that mean? So somebody will hear that, and if they've got a bias towards speed, it's all about action. The third guy along here is saying, well, we need to react quickly. That's what makes good customer service, because people want it fast. If that's his bias, that's what he's going to end up thinking. And if this person on the far right is thinking about the whole system of what they need to do as a team to respond to customer needs, or to respond in general to their requirements, they might be talking about prioritization. But whatever it is, unless that's super clear or discussed, if it influences their work together, they may well just turn out to be misaligned and start doing things differently. And I'd say the current situation is that there's more complexity, more diversity, and more change in organizations, which means that there's more stuff to make sense of, simply. And that the current approach to employee engagement is great for this kind of wallpaper context setting piece on a generic one-way basis, but it doesn't help people make sense of things on their own terms in terms of how it affects them in their jobs and what they are going to do in their teams to implement the broad brush strategy. And a while ago, there was SharePoint and Yammer and a lot of social networks that do a great job of helping people share data and information, but they don't actually help people get clarity or alignment when misalignment is at play. So that's where this is a people thing. This is a human thing. It's about dialogue. And the questions leaders are asking, this is a bit of a chart. If you look at the arrow on the left-hand side, we're talking about relevance and speed to action. You know, leaders ask academia, how does it work? They want to know, how do we work with psychometric testing? They want to know, how did we do then, which is the performance data piece. And the team alignment piece is about, well, how can we be ready in a unified way to deal with tomorrow, which is very much about empowerment. It's about allowing people to make sense of things, bring their points of view. It's about inclusivity, after all, the process. But I'll get on to all of this. I suppose the message at the moment is that the future of work means that the scope for alignment is only going to get more important, because with diverse teams and dispersed teams and short-term staff and people that have never met, looking to collaborate together faster, cheaper, better, more tailored, they really do need to get on top of alignment. And so alignment, if you look at a vision for alignment, could be a standard. It could be something that people do proactively on a regular basis. And that's what we're looking at today. It's how do you approach alignment, and what's the role of data in that? So just for a second, I'm just going to stop a minute, because to give you a chance to reflect here. Are there any comments so far on how you see the role of alignment or the necessity for alignment based on what I've just shared? Stefan.
I think my question is alignment and sense making for me is different.
Okay.
Alignment is you have a different point of views, but you do the same thing. You talk about, as you mentioned, and you have the mostly the same priorities. But sense making is for me is something different, because we all have different patterns in our head, in our brains. So what is what's going on in my head could be completely different, but we speak about the same things. So for me, what in your point of view, what is the difference between alignment and sense making? That is one question I popped up in my as you presented.
Yeah, good question. For me, sense making is part of the alignment process.
Okay.
In order to have people align, they need to be able to sense make in a social process and learn from each other's perspectives and consider the options in order to be able to align on the way forward. So sense making is an activity. I mean, it's a verb, sense making.
Yeah.
But alignment is, you can describe it as a process, but it's also an outcome. If everybody's aligned, they have to have made sense of things together in a collective. That's why we're talking about collective sense making. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Any other reactions, Peggy?
Yeah, I think I can reflect to, I think especially in Asian culture. So in the corporate world, what we say like sense making or alignment, it can be because, of course, everyone has their own opinion, but the final decision will be lay on the manager. So let's say I can say I don't agree what you say and or your decision, but I can say like the way you're doing things, I won't do that, but I can understand why you do that. So that's the way we have alignment. Like maybe I don't totally agree with him or she, but I can understand why they make the decision. And it's our sense making or alignment.
Well,
it's not necessarily take a very long process, but it's kind of our culture background. Like we can understand like maybe there's always a decision will be made by someone.
Right. And as a result of that dynamic, a lot of people think there's no point in bringing their ideas forward because somebody else is making the decision. In which case,
yes, that's also a very interesting part, because before the decision was made, then there was always the like discussion or like ask everyone's opinion or something like that. But we all know the final decision would be made by someone. It's not necessary by like our opinion.
So we ran a team alignment session in Oman recently, and the outcome was that people felt that they were more able to express themselves and speak up because the data that we collect is anonymous. But we also ask itty bitty questions that when you put the results all together, it paints a picture. And the reason why I connect around to that is because many reasons why people don't bring things up is firstly because they don't want to blame other people. Secondly, because they don't want to look stupid. But thirdly, because they don't want to articulate feelings of discomfort that they haven't been able to think through on their own. So they're not able to justify. So they might be prepared to say it, but they're not really able to justify it. They're like, that's not right, but I'm not going to bring it up because it's only half a thought. But when you collect bits of data on lots of indicators and put that together, it starts to paint a picture that reveals gaps and alignment gaps, we call it, that you wouldn't have seen before. So in that sense, coming back to your question, the alignment process turns more into a learning process where people are learning about the collective view, which will influence the ultimate decision, whether it's made as a group or made by a preordained person. So I think alignment has a role to play in any culture because of that ability to allow people to disclose observations about things that may not even make sense to them at that time. Anything from you, Anushka, at this point?
No.
Okay. Now, I kind of feel I'm going to show you a sample report about the kind of data that we collect and how that shows up. And I was going to do that a little bit later, but I know that you're all into looking at the data and you're probably thinking, how does data play a role? And I don't want to leave that to later if you want to know that now. So who would like to see a sample report now, or who would like a little bit more background into the research behind alignment and the field of alignment before we get into that diagnostic? So hands up if you want the way that I had planned it with the research.
Put
my hand up. Oh no, that's
Nah.
research.
No, it's okay. If the other two want to, it's fine.
I know, but now we've got a situation because I'm asking 4 people and 2 have said one thing. So Stefan and Peggy, are you happy for me to keep going the way I had, or are you like dying to see the data? Keep going?
Go ahead. Yeah.
We'll keep going. Okay, thank you. All right, so let me go back to my share screen and continue with the research behind it, because I think it's important for you to kind of click into this bit. So there are 5 key pieces of research that I want to go through. And the first you probably heard about, which is social constructionism. I won't spend much time on this, but it's about the fact that meaning is constructed between people through language. If you receive a message or a series of messages from the outside, it's unlikely that you will create conclusions about that without checking it off with other people first. Even if it's like, did you see that presentation? You know, did you think that? Or, you know, does this mean that we need to, or what was your take on that? And that's why the remote working piece is so difficult, because people don't get that opportunity to create a shared reality ad hoc. Okay. Now, part of this in virtual setting is that what we find is that people's biases are so strong, their motivations are so strong, that what they want the reality to be will take their interpretation into a direction that has them seeing things in a certain way. And to illustrate this, I want to talk to you about a story we had with a university project team. They're master's students, healthcare and public management. Their challenge, their project, was to create a co-living housing concept from Vienna to Linz, where students share accommodation with elderly people. So I'm not sure if you've heard about this. It still goes on. It's quite popular because there's a lack of accommodation for both of these groups, and they can actually help each other. So the professor on this work noticed that the team was kind of misaligned. You know, they were reporting the fact that their conversations were difficult. They didn't know how to move forward with the project. It was going slowly. And she wanted to bring in Mirror Mirror, which is the name of the diagnostic we're talking about, to teach them a bit about alignment, leadership, communication. Now, when we ask them, so what we do with Mirror Mirror is we literally ask a bunch of questions and we compare the responses. And some of these are qualitative and some are quantitative, but one of the main questions that we ask is, what's the purpose of your team? So when we asked that, about a third of the group said to see if elderly people can co-live with younger people. About a third of the group said to develop a new concept for co-living in Linz. And a quarter said to find out if the concept from Vienna works in Upper Austria. Now they're all correct, right? But they're all different. This is what we're talking about. Misalignment is when people can literally not see the gaps between how they understand things and take decisions and actions that turn into difficult conversations, because they never really get down to, hang on a minute, we're not quite seeing the same thing here. And I'll give you some results from other teams in a bit, but just to let you know, we've never come across a team that's fully aligned on purpose, even if the manager says, but we've been through this. You know, you hear that a lot. We've been through this. We've done this. Why are they not? It's because it'll like go, oh yes, it's this way because I want to go this way. Anyway, next bit of research, team effectiveness. This is, I think, the most powerful piece of the whole thing, because when teams use learning behaviors in the areas of psychological safety, interdependence, task cohesion, and group potency, those are the 4 categories, they become more aligned and effective. And the reason for that is when they can learn from each other, they can open up to each other's perspectives. If they feel safe enough to do that, if they trust each other enough, if they've got a reciprocal interdependence arrangement between them where they are able to listen to each other, then it affects the extent to which they are able to align. So team effectiveness through learning behaviors is a capability. So part of coaching is about teaching and helping people to understand how their behaviors are enabling effectiveness. And it's that link, because a lot of people think alignment is just about cognitive stuff. It's how do we understand things? How are we actually aligned? What is our plan? It's all about content. It's not, it's also about behaviors. And I'll get into that a bit more. Next piece of research is neuroscience, that without full explanations, consciously or unconsciously, we will create assumptions and stories to join the dots. For example, you walk into your office. There's an open window. It's first thing in the morning. There's nobody there. You think, oh God, last time the window was left open, it was Kevin who didn't close it before he left, because he's always the last one to leave. I must tell Kevin to close the window. Next bit of research, I'll come back to this. 80% of conflicts at work occur because of stories people have made up about what's happening and use them as the basis of their actions. In comes Lucy. Hi, I just went out for some coffee. I thought it was a bit stuffy in here when I got here, so I opened the window. It wasn't Kevin, it was Lucy. Now that's a really simple example. But imagine the complexity of work and the things that are not tangible, like a window that is open or closed, but they're conceptual and they're moving and they haven't happened yet, or they're described by one person in a different way using different words. The scope for assumptions at work and about how people join the dots is outrageous. I'll just give you another example. So we went to work with a logistics team. Part of the business had been sold off in their particular area, which reduced the workload by 50%. Now, the team assumed that there would be redundancies. They're thinking, okay, this is simple, 50% less work, half of us are going to go. 2 people had already left the team believing that they were going to be made redundant. Now, the team leader is thinking, actually, this is an opportunity for us because we are now freed up to create projects of the things that we always knew would add value. We just need the team to get behind this with their ideas about what adds value and how we can all work together to prove our new scope. So he's thinking about this. He's saying, yeah, we've told the team there won't be any redundancies, but the team don't believe it. They've got low energy. Of course they do. They believe they're going to be redundant. There's poor performance. There's no inspiration. There's a lack of momentum. They're totally stuck, which is where the HR manager brought us in to say, what's going on here? Why are they behaving like this? And nobody's going to say, you've told us that we are not going to be made redundant, but none of us believe you. I mean, that's a kind of, you just don't say that, you know. And so a lot of these things are about things that people just aren't prepared to say. So anyway, the last bit we've already covered, which is about the fact that virtual teammates are 2.5 times more likely to perceive mistrust, incompetence, broken commitments, and bad decision makings than those who are not. And they take 5 to 10 times longer to address their concerns. So if you put all of this together, the scope for misalignment is huge, and the opportunity for proactive alignment work is massive. So to get onto that, proactive alignment work is about inclusivity. It creates an inclusive culture because you're actually inviting people's opinions and considering them. You're revealing the alignment gaps because you are collecting all of these perspectives and comparing them to show where there is conflict or difference. You're building clarity and acceptance of what is currently going on by holding up the mirror, if you like, to people around what's going on. And you're able to close the gaps by providing more information about the strategic frame that may have been misinterpreted. So getting more clarity on that. And our basic thinking is that alignment is a requirement for engagement. You cannot just go and engage people. The old phrase where you say, let's go and engage people, as there will be people who are told is their job to do. Let's go and engage people. Yeah, exactly. Let's go and get them engaged is a phrase that's just ludicrous, actually, if you think about it, because if they're not fundamentally aligned on what are we doing and how are we behaving to achieve results, then how can they possibly be engaged? So if you have people aligned, where they can see each other's perspectives and they agreed on the course of action, they were more likely to be engaged. They are more likely to collaborate better and be more effective. So in that sense, you're increasing ownership and you're mitigating the risks of misalignment. And I'll get into this in a bit more detail soon, but the alignment then, the definition could be cognitive and behavioral coherence. They don't have to think the same thing as long as they're not at odds with each other and they are agreeing on the course of action. That's alignment. Whereas misalignment is about cognitive or behavioral dissonance between people. So before then I go into looking at the sample report, what we do is we identify and measure alignment gaps between people. And coaches use this data as the start of a facilitated alignment process to help people in a conversation that doesn't get into the weeds. And I'll describe how that works a bit later on. So the scope that we cover is on the right-hand side here, which is about how the strategy relates to the team, what developments affect the team, the work of the team, how team behaviors influence their effectiveness, and how well they're actually supported to deliver. Because all of these things, the whole system is in scope for misalignment or alignment. Okay. I'm going to go into some very quick trends just to start introducing you to the way that we use data. So what we ask a range of questions on, and I'm going to start with behaviors in those learning behavior areas that I spoke about. And then we present back on the cover page the highest and lowest scoring behaviors of that team. The orange bar is the average score, and the shaded area is the spread of scores provided, so that the minimum and maximum scores provided within the team. And every question we ask isn't about how people think of themselves, it's about how they observe what's happening in the team, which is important, because they're reporting on what's the meaning that is currently shared between team members. So for example, does your team have the freedom to be creative? Which is a question that you may ask of a teams in an innovation situation. Here, 75% said yes, minimum score 50%, top score 100%. So this is kind of interesting. And there's potentially, hundreds of areas of little alignment gaps here and there. But what we don't want to do is find the top kind of 5 or whatever. When I say top, the most impactful, you want to deal with the most impactful misalignments. So let's go to these bottom lowest behavior scores here. We've got clarity on direction and remit, 21%, where the spread of scores goes from 0 to 50. Sufficient reflection on progress and tolerance of mistakes. So these things, as a facilitator, if you were reading this report before you went to work with the team, you would probably be looking at these low areas, thinking what's going on there. Now, you don't have to have the answers. This is not a truth report. It's just a perception report. And it's not designed to give you the answers. It's designed to give you the introduction to the right conversation so that you can go back to the team with data that they gave you And you can go back to them and say, okay, what would it take? What would it take to get this score higher? And what do we need to do differently? So for example, this could be ask more questions of the team leader. It could be to bring in more information, for example. On sufficient reflection on progress, 38%, it could be that they could devise a particular set of questions to ask themselves on a regular basis. But the answers need to come from them. What do they need to be doing differently? So we looked at these results, and this
question.
Yeah.
So for instance, tolerant of mistakes. So the question was how much do you believe is a team tolerant of mistakes? And then they could rank between totally disagree and totally agree, or how did someone answer this question?
Yeah, so it's not about what they believe, it's about what they see is happening in the team. So is your team tolerant of mistakes? And
it's yes, no, or is it
sorry,
on the scale?
They're all agree, disagree questions. I'm not sure if I remembered that phraseology completely correctly. So it would be, our team is tolerant of mistakes.
Then I agree or I don't agree.
Agree or disagree.
Okay, so this puts it in perspective. So then 46% and 21% is really, really low.
Yeah. I mean, 21% is just appalling for that question, to be honest. But this is these are actual teams. This is just when COVID started breaking out. So they're all starting to work remotely. So we go to London in February. We don't physically go there. A lot of this is remote, of course. Same three things. That's really, I mean, the scores are a lot higher here, but the spread of scores is really massive. 100% to 0, it just means that at least one person in that team says, absolutely disagree, strongly disagree. So if you've got one person in the team thinking that, and this is an area that they consider crucial for their success, and you can discuss this with the team leader in advance. These are your results. What's most important for us to focus on? If calculated risks is something that they really do need to do because they're about innovation, or, I mean, clarity on direction and remit is really basic for any team, to be honest. So their scores are okay, but if one person is saying, no, I absolutely do not agree, either you've got an outlier who's extremely disgruntled, or you've got an issue because somebody needs to say something. Next team, London, March, same three things. Now we're analyzing our algorithms, thinking, is this some bug? No, it's not. A global team, 3, and all of these are changing on the top, of course. Clarity on direction and remit, 33%. So now we're right into COVID. Everybody's working remotely. Romania, it just keeps coming up. So what you'll find is that on this particular chart, because we have lots of charts, clarity on direction and remit is usually it's not, most teams don't have, I mean, obviously people are choosing to do this because they feel misaligned, but most of the teams that we work with need work on the strategic frame. And that's really something to facilitate as a group discussion, and something that you can pre-brief the leader on, so that when they come into that discussion, they've got as much information of the most recent information as they can. So it kind of goes on and on. And again, we've got a lot of misaligned teams, but misalignment, like I said, it's that kind of thing that people don't really see it through that lens. They'll be looking at problems, but they won't be thinking it comes down to misalignment, because ultimately, if they believe that the job of a team is to assess their options together in order to make direct decisions that they can all get behind, if that's what people think, then they're probably interested in alignment. If they don't believe that because they think it's command and control, or because they think that roles and responsibilities take care of it all, then you don't need to bother talking to them about alignment, because you'll be talking to them for a very long time. Okay, how's this looking? Any comments at this point? No, okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go straight to the sample. Stefan, is that up? Yeah.
I think it's very interesting because I think it's a very relevant pre-work before you facilitate something, and you get some really important insights where the problem or about the problems, and maybe some more honest insights than you get in the workshop itself. Yes. So I think it's really interesting how to begin your facilitation. It's already if you think about concepts, you have to keep in mind that maybe there's some other elephant in the room. So I think it's very, very nice.
Right. Really. What we're basically doing, sorry, I'll come to you in a minute, Miriam, but what we're basically doing is taking that, is being able to, normally you would go around a team and you would talk to team members, and you probably need to do that anyway to figure out whether they need this, what they need. But if you feel that they need alignment, then this is just a way to really give impartial, objective, research-based, structured, measured, and repeatable insights to that team that you wouldn't have been able to get as a single person. Miriam, what were you thinking?
Stefan made me think and reflect, and +1, because just today I was asked by, I usually ask everyone who connects with me on social media, what is your #1 facilitation challenge? And then I get all different sorts of answers. And today someone asked me back, so what is your #1 facilitation challenge? And that's what you get. And it took me quite a while to think about it. And then I realized that my #1 facilitation challenge is that it is very rare that the client actually knows what the purpose is. So they want to spend lots of money on a facilitative process or a facilitated session. And when I ask them, so why shall we do that? What is the purpose? What is the expected outcome? They're unable to really put this accurately into writing. And this made me think that such a tool would actually help to assess it, and also for themselves to see, okay, so what is actually the purpose of this process?
Yeah, and I think because it's a diagnostic on the whole system, you are exposing the alignment gaps, that's one level. But what are the alignment gaps about? You know, that then gives you, well, what do we need to focus on and look at? So if there's anything else, just yell. I'm just going to go straight into this sample report to give you a really, really clear idea about this data. Okay, so we call this particular type of product the Team Reflector. It's a survey. It takes 25 minutes for everyone to complete. We don't deal with customers directly, by the way. We only work through coaches. So we would effectively give you a survey link. You give it to the team, and then we give you the report when the results come back. And the report could look like this. So this is a fictional report. There's a bit about the research, a bit about our different products here. But here we are, the high level view. We start with those highest, lowest behaviors that we've just seen with all of those teams, right? And then we go into a summary of what we call readiness. It's just an overall thing with some generic comments, because we ask people whether they have clarity on how to achieve their goals, because a lot of people talk about clarity, but clarity on what? Is it clarity on what the goals are, or on how to achieve their goals, or on who is supposed to be, you know? So it's do you have clarity on how to, does your team have clarity on how to achieve their goals? Is your team prepared to succeed? Do you have pride, positivity, and alignment to the vision? I mean, you can ask them whether they think they're aligned, and we'll test that later. But here you can see immediately one of these sort of jumps out, right? I mean, preparedness to succeed. Oh my God! Even clarity on how to achieve shared goals could be that they need a workshop because there's a change, and this is about communicating the change. Fine, It doesn't really matter. But this is just the mirror. Here's another chart. What needs to be better established for the team to be more effective? And they can tick more than one of these boxes. So goals. All right, so they're really asking for more clarity on goals, and they don't know how to achieve them. But here they don't have the freedom to raise issues and questions. They don't feel safe. A lot about psychological safety here. It's not easy for people to ask each other for help. But yet they all say they take full actions on their commitments. Now, just to give you the backdrop of the story behind this data would be that they are a senior leadership team. They all have their own functions, and they're not really connected as a team other than being of the same position. In which case, they're probably thinking, what's alignment got to do with us? And as we know, of course, if they are able to collaborate well together, and if they have a consistent storyline and take decisions and actions that line up, and their influence then affects the rest of the organization, alignment has got a lot to do with them. Anyway, that's the first page, but then we go into this context bit and we ask them some simple questions, and the answers we group where the meaning is shared. So what's the vision of the company? So 40% said to lead in the supply of healthcare equipment, and 60% said to diversify in digital consumer products. So they're not really conflicting, but one is more of a vision and the other is more of a strategy statement. So you know, there's no conflict here, but there's kind of on different levels. But let's go to the next one, the purpose of the team. And here we have that comparison again. 60% say it's to support the group. 20% say it's to deliver top quartile ROI, and 20% said to lead. These aren't really purpose statements. They're more like, again, strategic objectives. So they're really like, we need to do this. And you know, if you're into facilitating purpose, and that's what your sponsor is looking for, this would be the trigger to say we need to do a session on purpose. What's the team goal for the coming 12 months? Now, here we have conflict. To reorganize, to outsource capability, to develop our in-house capability. You know, they don't really know. And this is the bit where they said we don't have clarity on how to achieve our goals, because they're thinking about their own functional objectives, probably. It's just a hypothesis. I mean, it will all come out in the conversation, but they're not really sure what their team purpose is and therefore how they contribute to that. So it's maybe things have moved on, maybe they've started to work remotely, who knows? I mean, this isn't about blame, it's just like, this is where you are. Now, what do we need to do to move this to a better place? And then the other question we ask is about the single biggest concern, which they don't have to be aligned on that at all, but it does usually point to the areas of misalignment, capability gaps, the challenge is too big, poor teamwork, under focus on the current business. The second page, and I'm not going to go into this in too much detail because otherwise I'll be literally training you how to interpret these reports in a short session. But we do ask what developments are impacting the team at the industry level, at the organization level, and the team level. And we list what they say. These are qualitative responses by popularity. So there is a codification process to receiving the raw answers, grouping the meanings where they're the same, and putting them into these charts so that we can organize this. So 3 people talked about consumer demand, technology. There's a new strategy. Is it a challenge or an opportunity? The strategy is a challenge. Okay. Yeah, and it literally will tell you what is going on for this team that you probably would have spent a lot of time trying to figure out without data. So this is just, and then we ask a follow-up question. For each factor named, how will this impact your team? And we ask them to tick 3 areas in these multiple choice, and we bundle all the responses together so that we can see overall what's being impacted the most, and it's roles and responsibilities, costs, distribution of work and strategy right at the top there. Often they're more polarized. These are quite even, but this is not necessarily something that you need to workshop. But when they are reading this report themselves, it'll be really interesting for them to look through and say, are they thinking what I'm thinking? Are they seeing the way I see it? And that starts to prompt questions when you get into the alignment process. So the rest of it is about, these are details on those numbers. The rest of it is about all of the other behavior scores that weren't in the top 5 or the low 5. We have a section on team learning behaviors. The most interesting one for me is constructive discussion culture, because if they cannot have a constructive discussion, they don't have the behavior the capability to align, really. So, you know, there's a lot that can be opened up here in terms of what support they need. And the facilitator is the only one who can take this forward, because you in your roles are objective, you are outside, and you are not in a power position over them, as their team leader is probably. And then we get into feedback on organization support, because they cannot be effective without that support. So for example, do they have good relationships with their stakeholders? Are they properly recognized and rewarded? Yes, they're probably a leadership team, really recognized and rewarded. Relevance of the strategy, though. 10% is the relevance of the strategy to your job clear? Well, no, not at all. They have no idea what the group strategy is.
And then one might ask what are they actually rewarded for?
Yeah, I know. So if they get this report, you're going to be able to, you don't have to share the whole thing with, I mean, we share the entire thing with them 48 hours before a workshop, or our coaches do, but you probably also can just snippy out the charts for the workshop that you want to focus on, and maybe give the report out later if it's too sensitive or too much. So you could say, okay, we're not going to share this chart, but we are going to share the behaviors, and we're going to share the purpose chart. And you could just focus on that. That would help a lot. The next thing we do is we ask about what frustrates them. And then we ask for a word cloud on how would you describe your team? And there's not many entries here, but normally it's much more populated, and they're all positive. When people describe their team, usually most of the words are positive. It's a great way to start a session, because you're saying, this is how you see yourselves. You know, you're here for a reason. We're going to sharpen that up because things are constantly changing. And we're going to get into better alignment, because that is one of the quickest and fastest ways to become more effective. Now, I don't think we're going to do the demo, because the demo is just an exercise with 11 questions that we would do with the 5 of us to show how we're perceiving something. But I think you kind of get the drift of how the data works.
Yep.
Are there any questions or comments on that data before I jump into the process that our facilitators use to facilitate this data with the team? Any questions?
Do you have to tailor the questions for each client or for each team? Or do you use something more general?
No, we have, because we are inquiring with very open questions about the whole system. Our questions are standard, but we can include add-on questions when teams are in different situations. For example, new teams, cross-functional project teams, post-M&A teams, leadership teams. So when you are asking for a survey, you would tick whether you want those extra question sets to be added on. And if somebody really wants customer questions, we can do that. But that kind of goes against the idea of alignment, because then it's not a discovery approach. Because often what this is all about is about asking questions that reveal things they didn't know they needed to know. And if they start asking their own questions, they're going off piste, and it turns into an employee survey. Good question, though. All right, so the one slide, very briefly, on the alignment process. And this is, I think, quite important, because it's not as if they're aligned or not aligned. if alignment is up here on this triangle and misalignment is down here, we've got, say, diverging perspectives down here, converging perspectives up here. And actually, when you go into a brainstorm for ideation on options forward, you want these diverging perspectives. This is the whole thing about diversity, of course. So it's not as if you want everybody to be constantly up here. But when you have gone through an ideation process and you have gone through a discussion to assess the perspectives and the options, you do need people to be up here, particularly around what are we going to do then? But you don't need everybody to agree. And the thing about this, of course, is that once people have been heard and they've had an opportunity to hear other people, they're more likely to get behind, they're more likely to be able to empathize with the reasons, and they're more likely to understand why agreement is a course of action. Why consensus is important, even if they don't agree themselves, even if they have a different view. It's that process of having people relate to each other. So the top level here is consensus on the way forward or agreement on the content. They can also agree, of course. Converging means that there is more alignment of perspectives. Diverging is more misalignment, and right down here is disagreement and conflict. And this is just not helpful at all when it comes to implementation, of course. So the process of alignment moves from the bottom left to the top right, of course, where misalignment with a closed perspective, where people are not open, you get that tunnel vision. This is the only way. Or you get passive agreement, or you get groupthink between alignment and misalignment. You don't want any of these things. What you do want is people to be curious and inclusive on the basis that they support their views and they challenge their own views, and they support other people and they challenge other people. And that's, really having people, so it's harder work, of course. It's harder work for people to get into this, and they trust their own view, but they also trust other people's views. And it's that sort of, I wouldn't call it a negotiation, but it is a kind of a fearless discussion, to quote Amy Edmondson, the fearless organization where people have the psychological safety, which is why these learning behaviors, for example, are so important, in order to be able to come to an alignment on that previous triangle I spoke to you about. And you can use a process that looks like this, where you ask people to classify the gaps, and we teach our coaches how to recognize different gaps. Is it about structure or information or perspectives, or what we call the dark side of alignment, where people have got their own motives and they're never going to tell you what they are, and they're actually, playing political games or whatever. But these gaps exist, of course. But you can ask people to sort of start to differentiate between different kind of gaps and prioritize them. What is it that's really important that we do today in this session? And then explore them. You can define the gap, and it's very important not to get into who caused it or why, or go backwards into baggage, because that's where people get stuck in the weeds of, oh yeah, but when he said this last time and we wanted to do that, then what happened was, and it's like, okay, well, you've lost everyone, because you haven't, but they have lost people in that explanation, because who cares actually? We want to know what the gap is, and we want to know what needs to change to get a different outcome, and capture what emerges. Is it a question? It's an idea. What is the feeling? What is the action? What is the feedback? All of these things, when captured in the alignment conversation, make for a plan of action in answering those questions, discovering the validity of those ideas, talking about those feelings, taking those actions, or passing on that feedback. That is what comes up that would not have happened without this conversation. That's the process of alignment. It's actually having people generate this, because it's so powerful. What would have happened if they'd never done that? If they'd never stopped to take those points, they would have been carrying on doing what they're doing, hoping to get different results. As you know, closing the gaps, only 4 ways to do it. It's getting clarity, getting the information needed. The strategic goal of the organization is to do this, and our role in that is to do that, for example. That clarity is about information. The bridge between perspectives is the ideal bit. where you really get the aha moment, where somebody says, well, I think we need to do it this way. And somebody says, well, I think we need to do it that way. You say, well, what if we did it like, and they put the ideas together and come up with a better idea. I mean, that's ultimately where you want to get to. Another way to get alignment is to arrive at that consensus we're talking about. That's alignment. It's alignment on the way forward. And then another way to close the gap is to say, okay, we're not going to deal with this now. It's either doesn't involve all of us, or we still have questions to answer. We're going to take actions in order to bring it back up another time. And that's another way to close a gap. You turn it into something that still needs questions answering. So all in all, this process is about this, having people not look back in anger. And that's what people fear. They don't want to normally open up the gaps because they think it's a can of worms and everyone's going to get annoyed. And it's like, no, we're going to do this constructively. We're going to do it safely. And we're going to look at what's going on in the team, and we're going to figure out, and we're going to look forward in awareness. Put the team first. It's about mutual learning, innovation, and consensus on the way forward. That's where you want people to focus. So what is springing up for you in this presentation? Do you think you could run that alignment process? Come on. Or what is it that you're looking at with that and feeling nervous about, if anything?
For me, what comes up, what would be interesting is to use it really as a preparation to then shape the workshop. So I wouldn't see, but I think it also depends on the type of facilitator. I wouldn't be the person who takes the report and works her way through the alignment process, but I would use this as a kind of cornerstone and see, okay, so these are the issues. Then I would maybe sit together with the leadership team and say, okay, how do we want to close this alignment gap? How important is it? And do you actually want just clarity? Do you want to build a bridge, or do you need everyone to have the same kind of understanding? And from there, I would then build the workshop.
Right.
So that's how I would see and understand it, because at the end of the day, nobody hires a facilitator to reach alignment. They hire a facilitator because they want to solve a problem. And I think that alignment, as I understand you, and it makes total sense, is a way to facilitate the problem solving or to achieve the real goal that they have. Because at the end, if they say, oh, now we have alignment, it feels like, yeah, no what?
I do get that question and I'm always a bit flummoxed there, because for me, misalignment is a problem. So, but it's a problem that is expressed in symptoms that they see as the problem.
And that's what I mean, that and this boils back to, or brings me back to my issue with my clients, that they don't understand the purpose of the workshop because they see the symptoms and want me to fight the symptoms. So nobody, and I still believe that nobody will consciously hire someone to create alignment. But if we can pinpoint the problem of the symptoms to something that is deeper, then it's, for me, it would be a way to connect.
Right. And I suppose you can design the workshop around a specific challenge that uses alignment as a kind of route into coming at new ways about it, right? Anushka, is that what you would do?
Yep. Yeah. I think it's the personality type thing. Like, I feel always a lot of resistance for pre-structured flows, because I still believe that there's a certain degree to uniqueness to a group and a group situation that I find sometimes challenging to then force them into a pre-structured process, instead of saying, okay, how can I make this process or a process work for them? Because at the end of the day, if my process doesn't reach the group, there's no point in this.
Yeah, and I suppose I supply a process just because a lot of people say, but how do we use this data?
Yeah.
But I wonder whether I should couch it in more, much more flexible optional terms. I mean, it's totally flexible and optional to be putting it forward like that, as if the client had said, we want help with alignment, which, Miriam, as you're saying, they're not going to ask for that because they're looking at the symptoms. Yeah.
And I see a huge opportunity for just a conversation trigger. So to have a very honest conversation. And I loved your initial example of we are responsive to customer needs, and then everyone understands something different, and everyone believes that, oh, I'm totally aligned with our company mission and I'm doing the best to deliver fast answers to our clients. And the other one says, yeah, but all your answers are wrong because we are quality first. No, we are speed first. And then to be confronted with this misalignment, and then have a conversation about it. Okay, so what does it mean, and what's actually the outcome, and how does this relate to our low performance, for instance, or low ratings on customer service platforms? That's where I see the real kind of beauty in the data. It's maybe not even, so I would present it maybe to the leadership team. I would not necessarily present it to an entire group.
Yeah.
But only take nuggets maybe to provoke them and to say, okay, this is what the data says. Now let's sit down and have a conversation what this actually means.
Yeah. And I think you've got to take a discovery-based approach. And what I mean by that is asking questions on an open basis across the whole spectrum. Because the minute that you start to ask questions that are very specific, you're going to get answers within that frame that may not tell you where the problems are. You know, do you think we need to be responsive to customers? Or how responsive do you think we need to be? Well, oh, well, really responsive, yeah. You know, well, what does that mean? So I think, yeah, if you feel that your customer is wanting to confirm or to check whether everyone's on the same page, or to get underneath the cause of issues that they might not be able to figure out, or if they're about to embark on the change and they need to know everybody's going to pull in the same direction, that there's no misinterpretation or no ambiguity about what the plan is. Yeah.
One case comes to my mind. So we had a storming phase at Never Done Before, about, when was that? A year ago, maybe, when it came to psychological safety. And what does psychological safety actually mean? And what's the role and the responsibility of the facilitator in maintaining that? And that was incredibly interesting because it revealed so much misalignment in terms of what do we actually understand by it? Is psychological safety, does it mean that I can take space and say, I don't feel safe and I need the facilitator immediately to make me feel safe and to respond to it? Or is it enough that I can actually say that and then I can, or does it mean that I can leave the workshop without being judged? And that was then a long conversation around it. But I would be curious how these kind of, how a structured process would actually reveal alignment to something where we have the impression that, oh, we are so aligned.
Right, so that's the confirming, you know, confirm or discover where the common ground and differences are, because, and I think it takes a leader that with a bit of humility to say, well, maybe we, even though we think we're on the same page, maybe we aren't, and this is important. You know, maybe it's so important that actually, yeah, let's just do a report, just see. Let's just see whether, you know, are we ready? to go forward on the next stage. Peggy, anything from you at this point?
No, I'm just thinking like, is it possible like people in the group, they don't think they don't know how, okay, they don't know they have misalignment.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of the gaps are completely undiscovered and go on being undiscovered for months because they are talking at cross purposes. They never really get to the bottom of it. They don't have sufficient time to reflect, you know, and people don't. Everybody's working quickly, just assuming things, joining dots, just going on, wondering why things didn't pan out as they thought it would.
But they don't know that's misalignment.
They don't talk about it in terms of misalignment. That's the thing. But, you know, as a coach or a facilitator, you can kind of say, well, it's possible that you're just misaligned on meaning. You're misaligned on how you're seeing things and how you're interpreting things without knowing it. You know, that would have to be a suggestion. But I must say, it does flummox me that because this is so fundamental, shared understanding is so fundamental that it's not really a priority or even a recognized term, the alignment thing, or recognized concept. So that's why I'm kind of it's really great to talk to you, Miriam, when we first started talking about, you know, the fact that there are a lot of facilitators out there who are doing their best to try and figure it out, you know, what and how to discuss that with people. And it's always a topic, isn't it? How am I giving my clients the best possible value based on their needs? So I just want to...
And how we aligned with the clients on what their needs are, because there's a big difference between their wants and their needs.
Right.
So very often they want a strategy session or they want kind of commitment on actions, but what they actually need, maybe alignment or team building or a conflict. And I think, yeah, the misalignment between the facilitator and the client is also a big issue. And then there was a total random association came through my mind was maybe you read or heard of the book with the 5 love languages.
I didn't.
So it's actually a very interesting book that there are 5 love. Everyone understands and shows love in a different way. And he identifies 5 love languages like words of appreciation, touch, gifts,
Of kindness.
acts of kindness, and
I think it's just 4, isn't it?
I think it's 5.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
okay. He found the URL.
And then what he says is that very often, if everyone has a primary love language. So if someone says, I love you because, I don't know, and makes some compliments, someone who understands love through gifts or acts of service, they're like, yeah, you say that you love me, but why do you never wash the dishes? Or why are you never making me yeah, but I show you my love because I gave you all these gifts. Yes, but you never give me a compliment.
Yeah.
This is total misalignment. So they all believe that they're right. Yes, I love this person, but they're not aligned on how they show their appreciation. And this is love in a relationship, but I think in a team, it's very similar. And I wouldn't be surprised if actually the love languages, not in a romantic way, but in a day-to-day practical way, actually also work in a team environment.
Yeah, and I think personality profiling, which has been really popular for a couple of decades, does have people learning how to talk their own, learning what their languages are, but it's very difficult to relate back into the context of the team. And it's almost like if you've got your awareness of your personality profile, if you've got some emotional intelligence capability and you know what your alignment gaps are, then you're in a really great place to be moving forwards. But I was listening to a podcast from Adam Grant on work life, and he was talking with somebody about how emotional intelligence, the popularity of that is misplaced, because it can often be used as an excuse for people to tolerate a lot of things because they're supposed to be, the expectation is you're supposed to be emotionally intelligent, so you're supposed to be able to handle things better, where actually it misses the context, because maybe they shouldn't be handling things better and they should be pushing back a lot more. So it just goes to show that, everyone's really trying to figure out how can we be more effective together when things are getting more dynamic and more complex and more diverse and more remote. And so, maybe people will start to talk more about alignment as being a piece in that puzzle, that has got a lot to do with coaches and their role in helping teams from the outside going forward. What we do, we've got a few minutes left. And I'd quite like to share a few. I've got some clean questions. If you've heard of clean language, yeah. I've got some clean questions that we use, that can be used in breakout rooms when people are exploring particular topics. And I've also got a measurement report that's just one pager that we use to assess teams 3 months after an alignment exercise. You may not call it an alignment exercise if it's focused on a particular objective, but after they get the mirror data and discuss how to be better together. So let me risk this voting with 4 people thing again. Do you want to go to the alignment data and how it looked 3 months later, or do you want to go into the clean questions? So hands up for data, more data. Hands up for clean. Okay, let's go to clean. All right, I'm going to share my screen again just because I've got them just sort of sitting in a Word document. But basically, if people need to look at their vision and goals in teams, we always start with questions like, do you recognize what the report is saying? Does this match up to your expectations? And what do these words mean to our work today? What 4 or 5 things need to happen here? I mean, that's such an open question, but I mean, if you're looking at purpose, what needs to happen here? What specifically needs to be done and which ones take priority? So it's just the kind of really, again, it's all about opening up the conversation. If you're talking about developments, what could be behind some of the challenges, the impact areas? Do you feel your team is ready to deal with them? If you're looking at behaviors, it's, what needs addressing? What would happen if we did nothing? What would 100% score look like in terms of what people are doing? What would you like the scores to look like in 3 or 6 months? What do people need to do differently to change the scores? I mean, it's quite logical when you come to look at them, but I think it helps to sort of see them. And then organization concerns. There's some pretty typical questions. These ones are kind of similar across all of the themes. But what indicators are the most important in terms of enabling progress? I mean, people could say, well, actually, it's not really about reward or recognition, but we really need to be able to get on with our stakeholders a lot better. Or we really do need to draw a stronger line between the company vision and what our objectives are as a team. Are there links between themes in the concerns and frustrations and the behaviors? You can start asking people to connect the dots between the data. So it's not rocket science, but it just gets your head a bit more into how does this look like when we're using the data. So, Steve, you were talking about alignment and sense making. And I'm just wondering whether I'm sort of going to I'm just going to start the closeout now on whether this got to what you wanted to get to, because I'm hoping that this was a helpful session. Are we using those terms interchangeably, or do you see that sense making as part of an alignment process? Maybe.
I think you have two parts. The one part is for me as a facilitator, I have to make sense what my customer is looking for, like Miriam said. And the other part is the sense-making process within the team itself, because many times we think, the solution is already within the team. Maybe it's not, because it's not diverse enough, because you are missing skills, you are missing ideas, I don't know. And I think sense making has two parts. The one part is for me helping me to become a better facilitator, to become more result focused, or more open to listening into the data. And one question that popped up is, maybe we can use other data than a survey to create insights into teams, because survey, I did study long years ago. I did study about pedagogical things and how do you call Operationalisierung? I don't know. Yeah, and I've learned that you shouldn't trust too much in interpretations, to call it like this, if you do surveys. One time I did surveys about I don't know. It's another story, but I think I find it really interesting to use data and to design workshops to facilitate and to discuss with leadership. But the other thing I really have some question marks is making sense within the team, and it's also some kind of alignment, but it's different because it's about different mindsets, different patterns you have in different heads, as I already mentioned. So I think it's very it's a tough task to achieve. So, but these questions are very helpful for me, and I didn't ask them until now. So.
Yeah, I mean, I know what you mean about not being able to trust interpretations that people provide in surveys, but the irony there is that what we want is the interpretations that people provide in surveys, because we are we're capturing perceptions.
Yeah.
And I think it feels difficult to have people politely argue, I suppose, in a way, is what you could be getting to when you're asking people to explain why things are as they are and what could be done differently. So actually you want people to hear different rationales and different options. So that's what you're stimulating. Yeah. But it doesn't have to be, well, I think this and I'm going to stick up for myself, and he thinks that and he's going to stick up for himself, and we're all going to kind of politely argue at all. I think it more has to be, if we're here now, what reasons do we have to do something differently, and what are we going to change? So it's really about changing the way that people see things and do things, I suppose, in whatever way you want to couch the workshop according to the objectives of your of the team and the intervention.
What just came up for me is that for me also the alignment and sense making are two different things, but that's just a gut feeling. For me, the alignment is the what is. So you reveal through the questions differences or similarities. And then the sense making is the so what? What does it mean? Does it actually matter? Maybe it doesn't matter that in certain things we're misaligned. And maybe it's even good that in certain things we're misaligned, because it adds creativity and maybe it opens up perspectives about stuff that, oh yeah, we thought we were aligned on this, but actually it doesn't make sense. Let's go the other way. So, and then, so the alignment is a what, the sense making is a so what. And then afterwards would come the now what. So now that we know that we're misaligned or aligned, we made sense whether it matters and what does it mean for the bigger picture, now what we want to do with it. And then it becomes a kind of a facilitated process for me. And if we have, and before we are checking out, well, I would love to hear what the others taking away from the session. And I would love to hear also if we now want to use the survey, or how does Mirror then operate? Is it, can we purchase a link and a report, or do we have to become members of the Mirror kind of consultant team? How do you operate?
We do have a training, which is a few hours online every now and again, because we do like to take people through what are the resources, how do you interpret the report, how do you explain this, what is the pricing, you know, it's the basic briefing. So it's a kind of training and an information session. You don't have to be like a member or anything, but then once we don't want anyone to go ahead with Mirror if they haven't had that. But then once you've had that, then there's a price per person on the reports for regular team members. And we're just about to come out with some products for board and executive level teams that are a price per team. So, you know, you can contact me if you want to find out more about it. But we are looking to really start to scale this up and make a noise about it and talk more about it, so that it becomes a little bit more mainstream, because at the moment we're out of beta phase and into this when we're effectively a startup that is looking to really start to get into the market. And it's I think it's really exciting, because you know, it's an area that organizing the mess in this area is something that hasn't really been done before, but hence coming to Miriam about never been done before. But anyway, we've got 2 more minutes. If there's any closing comments from you, Peggy or Anushka.
Like the one thing that especially after Stefan and Miriam's comments just now, that I'm wondering about is if there would be a need for sense making for filling in the survey. Because I can, like, thinking of the teams that I worked in or working in, I can see two kind of team members who might not be ad hoc be able to understand why this survey is supposed to be filled out, or do not feel safe to do that. So it's either the person who's like, why do I have to bother with this? Like I have a colleague's face in my eyes, and I'm like, he just would answer it in the way he gets the fastest out of the whole process. He just can't be bothered with it. Yeah, and then I'm thinking of colleagues that already feel not safe in the team that they're in. And then, of course, it's anonymized. I don't know which are the 3 people who said that and the 2 people who were there. But I think especially in smaller team, you can like deduct that. You kind of can figure that out. So is there a need for priming? And if there is, how can it both enable understanding in buy-in into the process and help with psychological safety around being honest?
Yeah, okay, so the very quick answer is that we have communications and short 2-minute videos to brief in people on what is this and how does it work and how do you receive the data and what's the workshop kind of about, that doesn't pin you down to a structure. The people who don't feel psychologically safe, we don't do this with teams of less than 5 people. And all of the qualitative texts are coded to try to remove attribution where people use, really unusual words that would reveal who they are, etc. So we haven't really had a problem with, unless we've got teams with appalling attitudes who do just do the yes, 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 yes. That hasn't happened very much at all. And that itself says something. And we can see that. So, we don't have too much of a problem with that, and we feel it does overcome the barriers of psychological safety, because people think, oh, finally I can say something. Anyway, Peggy, any other? I'm sorry, we can't spend more time answering your questions, but do contact me offline if you want to at any point.
Yeah, I think it's on the sense making. I think maybe everything should start from sense making, so we can have the alignment. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, we've been round and round with all sorts of terminologies, and I think it's how you count. It's the context in which you're using these words that will have them make sense for people, ironically. So we don't want to flip between alignment. Alignment is a verb, it's a noun. Sense making is a bit more common. It's associated with analyzing paragraphs of texts. Who knows? We'll figure it out. But anyway, I'm going to close the session now, and I'm really pleased that you were able to join, and time went super fast. So thanks very much for joining, and please do let me know.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. Super interesting. I will post it definitely in the community, and send you the link to YouTube if you also want to share it.
Yes, please. Thanks very much indeed. Okay. Good to meet you. Cheers.
You. Bye. Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.
Okay, so you're going to stop recording.
Oh yes, I stopped recording here.